Hello and welcome back to my channel. This is going to be a little bit of an awkward start to a video because honestly I've been in a bit of a booktube slump. The last time I actually sat down and filmed was for the booktube prize, and I had a whole stack of books I wanted to wrap up that I've been reading sort of alongside the books I've been reading for the booktube prize, and the stack of books I still had to wrap up just grew and grew, and it just felt like a big looming task I still had to do. So I decided to just start with a clean slate. I did read some great books, so I might talk about them in a later video, but for now we're going to start afresh. And what I thought I might change as well is do my wrap-up videos more like I did the video of the booktube prize, so talk about the books as I go along, and so share my first impressions and the midway thoughts, and maybe like more vloggy style wrap-ups. So now I wanted to talk about two books I've just finished. Yesterday I finished the Transgender issue by Shon. What she wanted to do with this book is to add a trans voice to the trans debate that's going on in the UK, or at least she focuses on the UK. It's a much more international topic. So in the UK there's a lot of tabloids, newspapers, TV shows where non-trans people talk about what they call the transgender debate or the transgender issue, where the conversation basically just gets boiled down to, are people allowed to use their preferred pronouns, and are trans women allowed to use the women's toilet. And what Shon does in this book is talk about the actual issues that transgender people face, so the problems they face when navigating the medical world, what like the medical process of transitioning means. She talks about the discrimination that transgender people face in the work field, life in general, and she argues in this book that if society was more accepting and more accommodating for transgender people, a lot of other groups would also benefit from that. So it's a lot about intersectionality. I liked also that there were chapters on being trans within the queer community, and the place of trans people in the queer community, and also the place of trans women in the feminist movement, and how transgender people often have felt excluded in communities that were supposed to be more open and more welcoming. So yeah, I think this is a really great book. I was already aware that things like gender, race, class, sexuality, that they all connect in some ways, and it's sometimes hard to view them as separate issues. So yeah, definitely would recommend the Transgender issue, An Argument for Justice by Shon. And then the next book I want to talk about today is Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. I buddy read this with Karen of The Roving Reader. So this book is about two people, Sam and Sadie, and they first meet when they are kids. Sam is in the hospital because he has just been in a car accident, and he spends long periods of time in the hospital because of some medical issues he has with his foot after that car accident. And then Sadie is there because her sister has cancer, so they obviously have to spend quite a lot of time in the hospital as well. And they, Sam and Sadie meet, and they bond by playing a lot of video games together, and they form a real close friendship. But they end up having a fight, and yeah, they separate and don't talk to each other anymore for quite a long time, until 8 years later, when they spot each other at a train station and they reconnect, and one thing leads to another, and they decide to make a video game together. And yeah, that's basically the setup of the story. They make a video game that becomes really popular, and like for the next 15-20 years they have this very complicated relationship with each other. And I thought that this book started out really great. I marked down quite a lot of things, and in my buddy read with Karen, we kept on messaging each other with like, you know, did you notice this? Did you notice that? And then, you know, there was quite a lot of points of discussion. But then the middle of the book dragged quite a bit, and we both felt like it was a bit boring, and we had a hard time sort of picking it up. And then in the end it did pick up a bit more, I felt, but I don't think this book is worth the hype that it's been given. I think the author had a lot of interesting ideas she wanted to put in this book. I had quite a lot of fun trying to figure out these things, and you know, trying to connect different storylines to each other. But in the end, I don't know, it just didn't quite come together for me. I felt like it maybe was a bit too ambitious, and it needed a bit more fine-tuning. I'm not sure what it was. The overall feeling of this book was that it nearly got there, but just not quite, unfortunately. Yeah, I enjoyed reading it, I enjoyed discussing it, but it isn't a book I would recommend to lots of people. So yeah, that's tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. And then I am in the middle of a Dutch book called Sanda. This is a true crime book of the story of Sanda. He died when he was 20 years old, and he died because of the things he had to do during a hazing ritual when he wanted to join a student club or a fraternity type of group. I won't go into the details of the things he had to do because they are quite horrific. You can find them on the internet. I think in the end he died of hypothermia and organ failure. So I'm about halfway, and the book is set up in that we alternate chapters, and one storyline is basically a reconstruction of the events that led to his death. So what he had to do in that hazing ritual. And then the other storyline is more his personal history. The author has talked to family and friends of Sanda, and he's getting a bit more into the history of student clubs in general, and also this particular one. And it's a very hard book to read. Obviously the reconstruction of events are particularly difficult. I almost sort of skimmed through them because they are so incredibly cruel. And then within the other storyline we are now, I think, sort of getting into why people would join a student club like that, because these clubs are known for having these really brutal hazing rituals. And I'm hoping it will also get into why Sanda in particular wanted to join this club, because he was a black boy, and he would be only the second person of color to ever join the club, because it's a very white, privileged, elite club. So yeah, I hope we'll get into that as well. Yeah, it's very interesting, but yeah, very difficult, and I really have to sort of pace myself with this one. So yeah, that's the update for now. I'll let you know when I have read some more books. I just wanted to update you on what I've been reading. I have finished Sanda. I can't say I enjoyed this book because of the subject matter, but it is a book that kept me thinking about it a lot. I think what made me angry the most about it is not even the things that he had to do in this hazing ritual, even though they were absolutely horrendous. But it is the absolute privilege and the way that these students of this club reacted to it. Like, they kept on saying that it was just an unfortunate accident, and never nowhere did they take their responsibility and say that, you know, this has gone too far. You know, even at the point where they realized finally that this boy had to be taken to hospital, you know, they were still more concerned how that would reflect on them rather than concerned for the well-being of Sanda. I feel like his death is just a direct result of what is wrong with white patriarchy. It's just infuriating to read. I wasn't always too happy with the way the author wrote about the topic. I think he did try to make this book as complete as possible. He talked about the events of today, he talked about Sanda's life and why he decided to join this group. He talked about the immediate aftermath and sort of the investigation that took place and the consequences for the other students and the consequences for Sanda's family, and sort of what the implications were for the student clubs like that in general. But I did miss a sort of more in-depth discussion of the racism and elitism aspect of this, which is what I was most interested in. And then also I felt it was a bit rushed in the end. I felt the subject deserved a little bit more time in the end, just to have it a bit more polished. So yeah, I'm glad I read it because I think it's an interesting topic, and I learned a lot about the events. I would never recommend reading this book though, just because of the horrific things that are described in this book. So yeah, I would just look into content warnings very carefully before you would read this book. And then I've started reading Fair Play by Tove Jansson. Thankfully this is a completely different book, because I did want to read something a bit more lighthearted. This book is about two women. They live across from each other in an apartment building. They are both artists and they are also life partners. So they share a very close bond with each other and have shared their lives for the past decades. So they've known each other for a very long time. I don't know if it's autofiction, but it does mirror the author's life in some ways. Tove Jansson also lived with another woman for a long time, and this is the cover is actually a portrait that Tove Jansson did of her partner, and they were both artists as well. So yeah, I think the book sort of mirrors a lot of their relationship. This is a sort of slice of life book. You get these, every chapter will just be a description of one particular scene or one moment in their lives. And in the introduction by Ellie Smith, she says that Tove Jansson is the best at this sort of minimalist writing, where she's not talking about much at all, but still is talking about everything at the same time. And I think in the first chapter, or the first story that she tells, that is a typical example of this, because she's talking about how one of the women wants to rearrange their picture wall. So at first glance it's just about these two women arranging their pictures on the wall, and talking about what should go where. But at the same time, it also has this deeper layer of taking a step back, having a critical look at something, maybe having a critical look at your life and seeing what can be rearranged, can something be taken away, can something be added. So this sort of simple picture wall just becomes a metaphor for something a lot bigger. And I think that what she meant by talking about nothing much at all, but then talking about everything at the same time. So yeah, I've only just started and I already really love this. I'm about 10 pages in and I already feel like I really know these two characters and I know how their relationship works. So it's a really short book, but I have a feeling that it is a book where I can take quite a lot out of it. So yeah, I'm very much looking forward to continuing to this book. It is Saturday afternoon and I had a really nice walk this morning. Basically there's two different areas for walking within cycling distance of my house. One is more foresty and the other one that I went to today is more like open, and it has a lot of hedges and it has more swampy and water kind of places, and that's why I went to today, and it was super nice. It's always a nice place to walk, but I don't know, today it seemed especially nice. We had this huge thunderstorm yesterday, so everything was still a bit wet and the sun was out, which made it all a bit hazy. And yeah, there were lots of birds. I saw the wild horses and the wild cows that roamed there, and lots of hares, and a lot of birds were singing, and it was just really, really lovely. I'll show you some clips. Maybe I've put them before this and maybe I'll put them after this, but I don't know yet. I went out early in the morning, so there weren't many people there yet, and it was just really, really lovely. But yeah, let's talk about some books I finished. So first I want to talk about Fair Play by Tove Jansson. I ended up really enjoying this. I know this is not going to be for everyone because not much happens in the way of plot in this book. But if you like quiet, more slice of life stories, then I'd highly recommend this book. It's about two elderly women. I think it's mentioned somewhere that they are around 70 years old, living together, and this book consists of all these short stories or more vignettes of things that they are doing in their daily lives. A lot of it is to do with their work as artists. One of them is a writer and the other one I think makes movies. They also travel quite a bit, so some stories are about them traveling. They travel to different countries, but also they have this summer house on an island that they spend quite a lot of time on. And then some stories are just about them like watching a movie or something. And what I really enjoyed about this is that it's about this couple who have known each other for decades and they are very comfortable around each other. And you can see they know each other very well. Often in this book they are kind of bickering with each other and they disagree about a lot of things, but underneath that there is this just really strong bond and this really strong love between them, and they always seem to know when to leave the other alone or when to just push them a little bit and take them out of their comfort zones. Yeah, I really like the way their relationship was depicted on the page. This is that kind of book where not much is happening, but there's a lot happening between the lines. It's only a short book, it's exactly 100 pages, so even though you only spend a very short amount with these two women, it feels like you've known them for years. Yeah, I would highly, highly recommend this book if this type of story sounds interesting to you. So that's Fair Play by Tove Jansson. And then I've also finished Genderqueer by Maia Kobabe. He is a genderqueer author who identifies as non-binary, and he uses he, er, em pronouns, which I'm not super familiar with, but I'm gonna try and get it right. So this is a graphic novel. I'll show you some of the art. And in this book they also talks about their experience finding out that he was non-binary and asexual, and I did find it very interesting, especially because I like theoretically know what being non-binary is, but I do find it sometimes hard to imagine what it would be like for someone who is non-binary, and he depicts it really well in this graphic novel, how our experience was with that, and how he sort of figured it out, that being non-binary fitted air, and how it was different from being trans. So yeah, I found all that really interesting, and it taught me a lot. As a story though, it felt a little bit too bitty. I don't think that's a surprise, because it goes from childhood to current time, and I think the author in the end, we are at the end, but I think in her end 20s or beginning 30s. So yeah, it's obviously difficult to go really into depth when you only have quite a short amount of space to explore that in. So it felt a bit more anecdotal than I maybe would have wanted to. But I do still think it's a very important book. I learned a lot from it, and I also think a lot of people will be glad to recognize themselves in this book. So yeah, that was Genderqueer by Maia Kobabe. And then I've just started reading Cantoras by Robertis. I'm only about 16 pages in. So literally I just started it. So I've just met these 5 lesbian women. The book starts when they spend their first night on this island, where they go to get away from the city. They live in a city in Uruguay, and there's a lot of political upheaval. Homosexuality is not officially forbidden, but you can get arrested for affront to decency. So in practicality, being a lesbian or homosexual or queer in any way is incredibly dangerous. So we just meet these 5 women who are trying to build a sanctuary for themselves on this island. So yeah, that's how this book starts. So far I'm really enjoying it. I'm interested in the characters we're meeting. I love to learn a bit more about the history of Uruguay around that time. It starts in, I think, somewhere in the 1970s. 1977. And I like the writing as well. There is this strong connection to nature in it. It has this lush, almost sensual aspect to it, which I really enjoy. So yeah, I'm very curious to continue in this one. I think this is one I could really enjoy. So hopefully I will. time for a final check-in. I have finished Cantoras by Carolina de Robertis, and I ended up really loving this book. And like I said, it's about this group of 5 women. They traveled to this isolated cape for a week just to get away from the city where they constantly have to be on their guards. And on this peninsula they finally realize sort of how valuable and important it is to be their authentic selves. So after that week they decide to buy this sort of ramshackle beach house, which is very dilapidated, but it is theirs and theirs alone. So there's no family, husbands, no one who can tell them what to do and how to be. It's like a real safe haven for them. And this is sort of where the title of the book comes from as well, Cantoras. Cantoras was a code word for lesbians in that time in Uruguay. It is Spanish for singers. So Cantoras means someone who can sing and who can use their voice, and also someone who can make other women sing and lift each other up. So yeah, I really like that title. And so this beach hut and this peninsula is a place where they can be cantoras and where they sort of reclaim that word. So we follow this group of 5 women over the next 30 years or so. They go through many difficulties with society and with their family, but also with each other. And it's about how they always keep on returning to this safe haven, to their sanctuary, and to each other. Obviously there's some really difficult things being discussed in this book. I suggest you check out the content warnings for this. But you know, you can imagine what will happen if you have a story about queer people set during a dictatorship. You can imagine it's not going to be an easy read. So it's a book that made me angry, it made me emotional and sad, but the overall feeling I got from this book was more one of love and community. It's a story of empowerment and lifting each other up, making each other sing like cantoras. I mean, you know I love a found family story, and I think this is a perfect example. I love how these 5 women who sort of randomly got together and who at first sight maybe don't have that much in common other than that they're all lesbians. They got together and they formed this really strong bond with each other, really strong connection, and they were like family to each other. Yeah, I think they will stay with me for a long time. So yeah, I really love this a lot. I'm surprised how little this book is talked about, because I do think this story has a very universal appeal. Often I will read books I love, but I know they're not going to be for everyone. But this I could definitely recommend to anyone. I don't know why it sort of flew under the radar, and I think it definitely deserves a bigger audience. So yeah, highly recommend you read Cantoras by Carolina de Robertis. I think I'm gonna end this video here, and I thought I would, kind of in the style of the booktube prize videos, I would also think about which book I would put through to a next round. So basically my favorites of the 6 I just read over the last couple of weeks, and this time I picked 3 books as my favorites. I can imagine it won't be exactly 3 every time, but it's just how it worked out this time. And the books I'm gonna put through are Fair Play by Tove Jansson, The Transgender Issue by Shon Faye, and Cantoras by Carolina de Robertis. I would highly recommend any 3 of these books, and I hope more people will read them. So yeah, that's it for this video. I would love to hear your thoughts on any of these books, or just say hello if you want to, and I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.